And that moment is here, coming to you early on a Friday. My name is Joe Gilpin, here on the Fighter's Block with my co-host, the man with a plan, king of Salvadorian strong style, Mr. Jesse Rivas. How you doing this week, Jesse?
Doing good. Still a little bit disappointed that Cinco De Mayo didn't end up the way I wanted it to be. But you know what, though? I am excited because we have some good fights this week, and next week will kind of fulfill my taste of what I think Cinco de Mayo should be. But we'll get to that when the time comes. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I agree with you about Cinco de Mayo. It didn't go necessarily to plan. I didn't have enough great fights in my TV, and I don't think I had enough big-bootied women around me. So that's obviously going to take an L, unfortunately. The fighting highlight of the weekend, though, certainly had to be the return of the king, Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, with a big knockout win over Vasyl Lomachenko, knocked him out in the second round. Jesse, what'd you think of the champ?
He went in there, did exactly what he was supposed to do. He knocked out Vasyl. Vasyl has always been a good fighter. I think deep down in his heart, he thought he was going to get this Rocky moment where, he kind of bullshitted some of his early career, then underperformed in his mid-career. Maybe he could, kind of cram and get an A at the end of his career and see if he can secure this big win and become this big star that he should have been back in 2007. But didn't turn out that way. Did not turn out that way.
This is how the Buster Douglas-Mike Tyson fight should have ended, you know?
Exactly.
This really is. With this win, Triple G ties Bernard Hopkins' record. I don't know if he has a couple of the key wins that Bernard Hopkins had, so I would still consider B-Hop to probably have the more impressive run at middleweight, but Triple G is still going.
I would say he had the more impressive run, but I'll say Triple G has the more entertaining run.
There you go. He's the people's champion, the Mexican champion. Of course, Cinco de Mayo weekend, how do we kick it off? A Kazakhstani versus an Armenian, clearly.
You know what's funny is the fact that, for as exciting as Triple G is and as boring as Bernard Hopkins was during his reign, B-Hop still draws way more to his fights than Triple G.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think B-Hop had that big following and Triple G doesn't have as big of one?
Well, of course, he had the two big names of Trinidad and De La Hoya. Like, you just can't top that. From that, you're golden. This is a time period, to be the man, you have to beat the man. And he beat the man, and he beat the man who beat the man. So, if you get those two giant wins in there, that's huge. That's like if you had beaten, if you beat Pacquiao and Mayweather. Like, those are like the big names of their day. So Triple G was an honor to be able to fight Mayweather or to fight any of the bigger names. It would be completely unfair. He's a really big guy to put him in there with a Pacquiao or a Mayweather. But it would have been nice to see him fight a bigger star and get a name under his belt. I just can't think of a star in his weight class at his time where that would have happened.
I was hoping you were going to mention we might rewind the clock about 6 months or all the drama coming into this. Pay-per-view king, Canelo Alvarez, sitting on the bench. He's probably out until we're looking at probably a September-October return for him. September, we assume. But he got caught using steroids, so now he is sitting on the bench.
Do you think Canelo would have been that crossover fight that he needed? Because, he got a draw. He technically should have won that fight, but had he gotten the W back a couple of months ago, do you think he would have been able to be that pay-per-view crossover star?
Unfortunately, I don't think he would have had the same crossover appeal because I don't think he would have had as intense a fan base as Canelo has with the Mexican fan base. I don't think he necessarily has that, even though he has a strong connection with the Mexican fan base, ironically. I think that if he had walked in and stopped Canelo, we might be talking differently. But even if he had been given the decision that I think he earned, I don't think he would have the same crossover appeal now.
So we also had a fight that did have crossover appeal in the UK. It made a lot of money. It made a lot of dough. It made it to the point where the United Kingdom could honestly say we could throw big giant fights and we don't need American money. And that was Hay versus Bellew 2, the rematch, the grudge match. Was Hay injured the first fight? Was this fight going to be different? It was not. How did you see this fight?
This fight was very different in that Tony Bellew came in and beat his ass even worse. David Hay looks so old in this division. He is slow. He has no reflexes. He has no chin left. David Hay Please retire, bitch. You need to get out of the sport. Go just fuck your Miami girls. Have an amazing life. You've been a rock star ever since you fought Vladimir Klitschko in one of the most boring fights I've ever seen in my life. But thankfully, David Haye might be going away. We do have what I believe to be a potential star in Tony Bellew. I thought this was another amazing performance from a guy who only turns in amazing performances now.
It was a great performance. He called out Andre Ward at cruiserweight, and he called out Tyson Fury at heavyweight. Is Bellew too small for heavyweight?
Yeah, he's a little soft, right? Like, he's captain. I've called him this 100 times, but it's true. Captain of Team Softbody, Tony Bellew, calling out the only fatter high-level athlete, Tyson Fury. I would love to see him drop.
Can you imagine the trash talk in that fight?
Oh my God! While they're both eating ribs, by the way. I think I would like the Andre Ward fight a little bit more. Unfortunately, Andre Ward is retired, but he's not that retired. If the money's right, he's not that retired, you know? We've seen people come back.
We were supposed to get that fight in Creed. We're supposed to get that fight. Sylvester Stallone predicted it.
Oh, man, that's right. And then he broke his fucking jaw with one punch. Andre Ward needs to get this fight back. What are we talking about? He needs this win. So that's the fight I want the most.
Do you think Ward comes out? Because I don't think Ward comes out of retirement. I think the Tyson Fury fight is very possible.
The Tyson Fury fight is possible. I think Tyson Fury's people especially would love it. And even Tony Bellew would probably really like that fight. Tyson Fury has done a ton of damage to his body with drugs and different abuse. And, you know, anybody would be happy to get his name on their ledger. If he can't get one of them, I would say you start looking at maybe like the Bradis. I would love to see him against Bradis.
That'd be a great fight. You know what? I don't think he would. I think he's a super fighter now. I think he's crossed over.
Money weight?
Yeah, I think he's money weight now. I think those big, scary guys in his weight class wouldn't produce the money he could make with just the name now. I think he's officially a name in Europe.
What'd you think of the promo after the fight?
I thought it was great.
It was awesome, right? Man, it had me a little choked up. Because the emotion was just so real. You know, it's so easy to connect with somebody when they're just, you know, exposed like a raw nerve. I loved it. I thought it was... It wasn't an intentional good marketing move, but it was a good marketing move. People are going to feel for him and connect with him even more so. So his next fight, he's going to be worth a ton of money in the UK. Oh my God. Tony Bellew sitting pretty. Pretty Ricky Conlon.
I like it.
Speaking of pretty... Ryan Garcia fought this weekend, Jesse, and he picked up a unanimous decision over Jason Velez out in California. He did draw locally, and he was able to impress some in this fight, but some people are coming away saying he still needs more polishing. Did you get a chance to get eyes on this fight?
Yeah, this is the best fight that could have happened to the kid at 19. We saw exactly where his level was. He fought a real world-class fighter. Top 15, top 10 in every single sanctioning body. He's a guy who's got some very good wins under his belt. He's beaten future legends. I mean, Jason Velez, on their way out, but he's a gatekeeper. He's a legitimate gatekeeper. I was impressed by what Ryan Garcia could do at his age. Not many people could do what they did against Jason Velez like the way Ryan Garcia did, but he did show a lot of flaws. So this is a winnable, tough test for him, and that's how you're supposed to book your fighter, and it was exactly what it's supposed to be. And he's going to need some grooming. What'd you think?
I agree, definitely. He looked very slick. His reflexes, his athleticism is awesome. He seemed like, actually, in moments, a smart fighter, but then he backs straight up at times. You know, his hands are a little lower than I would like him. He's only throwing one punch at a time, and that's just not going to work against the best of the best. Unfortunately, these are the guys he's calling out. So I'm hoping that he's not going to get a little ahead of his skis and end up getting himself into trouble here. I would love to see only lateral moves for a little while. Or, honestly, step backward. Take your time with Ryan Garcia. This guy is a fucking star.
I would love to see him marinate for 5 years.
There you go. Oh, think about it. He could be the next pay-per-view legend.
Yeah. He'll be 24 years old. He'll be in his prime. He'll probably be a couple of weight classes bigger. He's a big kid.
Yeah.
He's 5'10" at that weight class. He's really big for the weight class.
At 19, yeah. He's going to keep growing. He's going to keep maturing. And I hope I thought he showed okay power in this fight. I was hoping to see a little bit more pop on his punches a lot of times. So I hope as he gets bigger, he develops a little bit more oomph to his shots.
And there's no rush on this guy. There's no rush. Just cash him in, book him properly, and make your money.
Absolutely. If I can make a call out right now, I've been talking a little bit about call outs. I want to call out the UFC for doing some bullshit. No card on Cinco de Mayo weekend? No UFC, no MMA at all on one of the biggest fight. This was Fight Coachella, and we didn't have anything. What is this from the UFC, Jesse? This is bullshit, right?
I'm gonna say this just by watching boxing and watching MMA and like going back and forth. You don't get the same feel that you do when you hear Mauro Ranallo or you hear Paulie Malignaggi when you turn on a UFC fight night. Like when you watch Joe Rogan, you still get that excitement. You got Daniel Cormier. When you have the A squad of announcing, you get to feel like something important's happening.
That tingle deep down in your specials.
Yeah, and you get that when you hear Mauro Ranallo on Showtime, or even when you hear Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, you kind of get that like, okay, something important's about to happen. No, Dan, I feel like that's part of the reason why UFC's not as cool anymore is because you're getting these free cards, and the announce team they're good for like a smark for someone who's into MMA. But if you're watching it as a newcomer, it's like watching soccer.
There's no chemistry, right? There's no spark. There's no under fire that I'm looking for. And I agree. MMA as a trend, it's trending downward. And there's no dispute about that. You know, how often do people come up to you and just start talking about MMA? Maybe once a month?
Nobody knows anybody but Conor anymore.
Yeah, nobody knows anybody. There's no big stars. It's this huge problem. And honestly, ever since they put in the drug testing and they're hearing about all these high-level guys like John Jones testing positive, they assume everybody on the sport is now on drugs, when really it's supposed to be the opposite, right? It's supposed to be USADA supposed to clean up the sport. But you have to remember, when was the last time you ever heard about a positive drug test in like football or other sports, major sports? It doesn't happen. So people just hear about UFC fighters popping positive, and I think it actually has a big detracting effect.
Speaking of stars, there's the rumor that I heard.
Now let's compliment the UFC. Here we go.
Yeah, so the rumor is that the winner of Khabib versus McGregor in September will be fighting GSP at 170 instead of the Nate Diaz GSP fight at 155.
Okay, let's start with the Nate Diaz versus GSP fight for a second, right? Because this rumor's been floating around. It doesn't make any fucking sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It's Nate Diaz is, a 55-pounder. GSP just won the belt at 85, and now he's going to drop 30 pounds to fight Nate Diaz, who's never even been a UFC champion. It doesn't make any sense. GSP doesn't need a fight to get used to a weight class. He's GS motherfucking P. He doesn't take warm-up fights. He is the main event at all times. It doesn't make any sense. Throw it out the window. Nate Diaz is not getting the GSP fight at 155.
So, it kind of brought up the question of, this was announced by Brendan Schaub on his TV show that airs on Showtime. And, you got to believe it is a reliable source, and he just kind of slipped out there. And then one of the people on the show asked him, they're like, wait, did you just drop a bomb by saying McGregor versus Khabib is in September? And then he kind of plays it off, and then he keeps bringing it back on the show like it's just common knowledge that they're fighting in September. So, have you heard this reported anywhere else besides the Brendan Schaub show?
No, and then when you told me, I went and looked, and I can't find anything about this. It's not even really on Twitter. Nobody really is taking this up as a big news announcement, but it is. And I do trust Brendan Schaub. He does have sources that would know this.
I mean, not only does he have sources, but he broke McGregor Mayweather before anybody else did.
There you go.
He's broken a few fights before anybody else has, and I mean, so I trust him as a source.
I think it would be great for McGregor versus Khabib to be in September. I would love to see if they are going to go up against the possible Canelo Triple G rematch that we're expecting in September. Or how they're going to affect each other, right? Because whoever lands on a date first, the second is probably going to have to move.
And there is a UFC fight night on September 22nd, so that weekend's off.
Interesting. Man, where do you think they do it? Do you think it goes to Vegas, or do you think they get ballsy, go to Russia?
Vegas.
It's got to be Vegas, right? Fight Capital. It's the one that it's probably going to be the biggest fight of the year in terms of buzz and anticipation. It's, you know, Conor McGregor's big sweeping return. This fight is going to happen in Vegas.
So another thing that's happening in this upcoming year that's really exciting is the return of the World Boxing Super Series. They have been renewed. They're going to have another season. In this season, they will have 3 divisions instead of 2. Are we getting crazy? Or are we excited about the 3 divisions?
I'm pretty excited. I'm going to be honest. I've loved all I've seen from the World Boxing Super Series so far. To me, it's been a rousing success as a fan. And to increase that, I'm super into it. I love tournaments like this. I think this is a great way to showcase some of these lesser known or lesser appreciated divisions.
And I love the fact they went with bantamweight. Bantamweight is not a highlighted division.
118 pounds.
115 pounds has a lot of big fights. I mean, we've seen Chocolatito made that weight class pretty big. If you go a little bit above that, there's weight classes that are money weight classes. But this weight class has been kind of ignored. I'm excited to kind of find out a little bit more about the fighters. Why don't you tell them who's been announced?
Okay, so we got WBA champion, number 4 in the world, Ryan Burnett. We have number 3 in the world and WBO champion, Zolani Tete. And the IBF champion, number 7 in the world, Emmanuel Rodriguez. Rounding out your top 4, because they kind of go top 4, bottom 4. Rounding out your last of the top 4, Naoya Inoue is going to be taking on Jamie McDonnell. Winner of that fight is in the tournament. And I fucking hope it is Jamie McDonnell, because they really want a strong British presence in this tournament. And you got to believe Jamie McDonnell from the UK, number 2 in the world, should be that guy.
That'll be a great fight. I'd love to see him in there, but Inoue is trying to conquer, what is it, his 3rd or 4th weight class in only 15 fights. The guy is amazing. He's a pleasure to look at. He's a phenomenal fighter. And
Wait. A pleasure to look at? Is that what we're rolling with? A pleasure to look at? That's a very, that's like a steamy way to talk about somebody.
He's a phenomenal fighter. I mean, he's a really good fighter, and he keeps getting better each time. He puts motherfuckers out. 15-0, 13 knockouts. So he's going for his 3rd weight class. His 3rd weight class in only 16 fights. Jesus, that's amazing. That's unheard of. And 13 of those are by KO. 13 of his last 15 fights are by KO. You gotta favor him against Jamie McDonnell. Jamie McDonnell's been a champion for a long time, but he's the secondary champion. He's the secondary champion to Ryan Burnett. It's gonna be a good fight. You know, this kind of gives me more interest on the May 25th fight in Tokyo.
Oh, absolutely. How could it not? It's a play-in between 2 good-ass fighters. This is amazing. One of these guys is going to be in the Super Series, and that's even just an honor. That's a huge fight on May 25th now. We'll break that fight down when it comes. Jesse, have you heard anything about what the 2nd or 3rd divisions might be?
I thought it was a rumor, but I'm seeing announced fights already, which is for the 100, the other weight class is the 140-pound weight class, junior welterweight. Regis Prograis is in negotiations, and Ryan Martin, who's a prospect out of Cleveland, who's 18-0, supposedly a phenomenal amateur as well, like Regis Prograis.
Awesome.
They're in negotiations. So pending on bigger names coming, like Regis and Ryan, they've already said that Relic, who just beat Francis Bartholomew, the guy who had
Cyril Relic.
Yeah, so the guy, Relic, had a close fight with Rancis and then defeated him in the rematch. He's going to have to fight against the dude that Ndango beat for the title, Edward Troyanovsky.
That's a hell of a quarterfinal.
That's a pretty good quarterfinal. And then there are these 2 guys, one guy from Russia, one guy from Sweden, who are both undefeated fighters, fighting for a vacant title in the quarterfinals. It's going to be, looking at the records and kind of just reading a little bit about each person, it looks like it's going to be a very competitive fight, a very competitive tournament with undefeated 140 pounds that are all young, except for Edward from Russia.
This division was kind of cleared out by Terrence Crawford. It was just held down for a little while by Terrence Crawford. And when you have a champ on top who's not really the most charismatic, media-friendly guy, sometimes those guys who are a little bit further down in the top 10 don't really get their due. Because when they fight the better guys, they don't really get the mic time because nobody's covering those fights. So this is going to do a lot, I think, for somebody to really establish themselves as a potential star, somebody who people should be watching. Early on, you got to like Prograis, right?
Yeah, I think Prograis is the favorite. But I will say this. I've heard great stuff about Ryan Martin, and this is what I love about the World Boxing Super Series, the fact that they get the weight classes that don't get any shine but have a lot of good fighters, and even the good fighters on the low. Like, I never heard of Ryan Martin until it got announced to this, and then I started looking him up, and dude's amazing. Finally, he gets his shine. It's fantastic.
Exactly what you like to see. What I like to see is some fight announcements. Can we do a couple quick fight announcements here, Jesse?
Absolutely.
Okay, so on the UFC side, we're looking at UFC on Fox 30, probably the headliner. Number 3 in the world, Eddie Alvarez, taking on number 4 in the world, Dustin Poirier. And that could be a number 1 contendership fight for later on down the year, depending on what happens with Conor and Khabib.
Yeah, this is a fight you've been calling on a lot. You've absolutely been winning for this fight.
I'm so excited. This is one of the big violence fights of the year. Think about who Dustin Poirier is. Think about who Eddie Alvarez is. These two are going to put each other through a meat grinder, and I can't be more excited.
And this is a rematch.
Is it? It is. I believe Eddie Alvarez, he put out Dustin Poirier, but there was some... it was a very violent fight, but there was controversy. I believe it was a knee on the ground.
Yes.
So you got to believe Dustin Poirier is going to want that fight back. Also announced, number 3 in the world at middleweight, Luke Rockhold is moving up 20 pounds to take on towering Swedish Inferno, Alexander Gustafsson, UFC 227.
I'm excited for the fight. I'm excited to see Racquel back at light heavyweight. So I think it'll be a great fight. I think I'm looking forward to it. I think Gustafsson might be too big, too skilled, but I've been impressed in the past. A lot of these guys are moving up in weight and performing better in higher weight classes. You got to believe how much Rockhold is still in it, but he trains with DC, so... Yeah,
but he's taking on Alexander Gustafsson, who also may or may not be into this sport. So it's kind of interesting to see both these guys are both amazing, but they both definitely have outside interests that are pulling them out of MMA at times.
One guy who's been ordered by 2 different sanctioning bodies to fight 2 big fights. You'd love to be this guy right now.
Both his side chicks want to be main chicks. I'm into that.
Dylan White recently had the WBC say, hey, we're ordering you to fight Luis Ortiz to be the next person in line to fight against Deontay Wilder. Then the IBF said, wait a minute. Pulev is the number 1 contender to fight Anthony Joshua. He has not fought Anthony Joshua, so we're going to strip Joshua, and he has to fight Dylan White. So now Dylan White has options, and he has 2 paths. Kind of feels like those role-playing games, where he can either go the Wilder route, or he can go the Joshua route.
I love a Wilder role play, baby. Give it to me.
Or, you know what, I take that back. He actually gets the title because they took the title from Joshua, so he can either be a world champion, disrupting the unification, or he could be a number 1 contender against Wilder.
Well, when you put it in those terms, it kind of feels like there's an obvious choice, right? You take the belt. I would. I mean, there's not always you're not going to get a lot of chances in life to be a world champion, and that does seem easier. Even though I know he may have designs on fighting certain guys, when you put it in those terms, go for the belt at all times.
Absolutely, I think that's the best one for him. And I mean, at the end of the day, the Luis Ortiz fight, the Pulev fight, this is the end of the last generation of heavyweights. Like, it seems like the sanctioning bodies are kind of clearing out, like, the old and in with the new. And I think Dylan White, I think he's world championship material. Pulev's only lost to Klitschko, I believe. So it's going to be... It's an interesting matchup, right? It's an interesting matchup, and I think that's the one I prefer as well. Jesse, we've saved for this little special news section probably the biggest, meatiest news for the last part. There is now in place a UFC deal with ESPN to stream on their new ESPN Plus service. It's going to start in January. They're going to get 15 cards annually, $150 million per year. I think that's fantastic. I'm a big fan of ESPN and what they've been doing because they used to be a joke. They used to be the feeder league to Showtime and HBO when it came to boxing. Then they signed with Top Rank. Now they're bringing us those fights. You got Terrence Crawford on there. You got Lomachenko. Lomachenko versus Linares this weekend's going to be on ESPN. You got Manny Pacquiao fighting on there against Jeff Horn. You've had some great fights. Now they're moving in there with UFC, the number one brand when it comes to mixed martial arts. Like, you're really growing. Basically, you're making ESPN exactly what it's supposed to be, which is like the sports networks where you're getting the top of each class, not just a feeder minor league in there. So I'm excited. I think it's great. I think it's great for the brand. I think it's great to have everything under one umbrella. And I would love to see maybe some interaction now that boxing and MMA are on the same channel.
I absolutely agree. I think that's a great point about working together. I also think you can't understate how nice it will be that we can rely now on ESPN to have a stake in covering MMA. So whenever there's a fight coming up that is a little bit bigger, they've always covered the biggest fights, but now when it's at that A-, B+ level of fight, we can kind of expect that ESPN, wanting to protect their investment, might step in and market it a little bit more. And they are the world leader in sports. It matters when they cover somebody like this. Their covering of Deontay Wilder has helped make him a much bigger star than I think a lot of people realize in the U.S. I'm excited as heck for this deal. I think it's a really, really good deal for the UFC. I think this is a great deal for the UFC.
And you also have to understand the reach of it, too. ESPN makes you mainstream. You now come on any bar in America.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's such a legitimizing factor. My hat's off to all those guys. They're also going to get certain access to some Fight Pass series, like the Contender Series that goes on, the Dana White Contender Series. By the way, former NFL player Greg Hardy is going to be on pretty soon, I believe, maybe he was on it already.
Oh, the dude who beat the hell out of his girlfriend?
Yeah, exactly. So he's 1-0 there. We at least know that. How he gets sanctioned, by the way, is beyond me, but that's beyond the point.
You're too violent for the NFL. Come to UFC. Let's teach you how to really fight.
Honestly, I think he's biding time until the XFL. And he's just going to go out there with, machetes and just knock people's heads off. I can't wait. Anything more about this ESPN UFC deal that you want to educate the people on?
Well, no, but I am excited about that fight that's going to be on ESPN this weekend, which is going to be Vasyl Lomachenko versus Jorge Linares.
You're excited for the number one fighter in the world, Vasyl Lomachenko, taking on the number one fighter in his weight class, Jorge Linares? I am also super fucking excited for this fight. I can't wait. I think people are underestimating so badly how competitive this fight could be. Jorge Linares might be the world's most underrated boxer. And I say that about a guy who is number one in the world and 6 years unbeaten, Jesse Rivas.
I think there was a passing of the torch in 2007 when Jorge Linares made his HBO debut against Oscar Larios. Oscar Larios, in the late 90s and early 2000, your pound-for-pound list was absolute bullshit if you didn't have Oscar Larios on there. The problem with Oscar Larios is he never got mainstream crossover because he kept getting knocked out randomly in fights where he shouldn't have. The fights he should have won, he would get some random knockout with some guy he was a big favorite against. And that kind of killed a lot of his vibe. But if you actually watched his fights, he had such great technique. He was a phenomenal boxer. He was just brilliant in there at times. He was an artist, an absolute artist. And, he kind of built a little bit of a following over in the UK. He fought a couple of the fighters over there in these big fights, but then ultimately he ran into this kid, Jorge Linares, who was 22 years old at the time, and boxed his brains out and kind of put the end to Oscar Larios. And it was impossible not to fall in love with the skill of Jorge Linares at the time, but it's such weird irony that his career has been almost a mirror of Oscar Larios. He hasn't been able to pull the big championship run to get him crossover appeal. But this fight might change everything.
This is definitely a big, big opportunity for him this weekend. This is a guy with amazing technique. He's a very athletic guy as well. He has all the tools to do it. Unfortunately, he's fighting a guy that a lot of people believe is the number one fighter walking the planet. and that is Lomachenko, or Liv Moschenko, as I've been calling him. Liv Mos, Taco Bell. He has made the last 4 people that he has fought, all of them Hall of Famers. He didn't knock them out. He made them quit, which is some gangster shit. And now he's moving up another weight class. He started at featherweight, moved to junior lightweight. Now he's up at lightweight. This is his debut to take on Linares. Vasyl Lomachenko. Oh my God, how fucking good is this guy?
In 11 fights, he might be an all-time great already. I mean, he beat Guillermo Rigondeaux, Nicholas Walters, Roman Martinez, which isn't a big deal, but Roman Martinez has been a long-time champion. This is not a guy who just won a belt and then lost like a Jason Sosa. This is a guy who is a legitimate top of his division for many years kind of guy. And he beat Gary Russell Jr., who's still dominating in his weight class and still has the fastest hands in boxing. So it's really hard to pick against Lomachenko. It's really hard not to be as impressed, but I will say this. I feel like he's underrated himself, and I think it's the reason why a lot of people refuse to say LeBron James is as good or better than Jordan. People don't appreciate you in its time, and I feel like that's happened with Lomachenko. He's not really being embraced in his own time.
He's a negative 1,400 favorite in this fight. Are you sure you want to stick by that?
I'm not saying the odds makers don't appreciate him. I'm saying the boxing fans.
That's fair.
He should be crossover as a Manny Pacquiao was 10 years ago.
Absolutely, and I think he's weird. I find that he has like a weird charisma. I like this guy that feels like the spirit of boxing. Like we made a clay doll and the spirit of boxing overtook it, and he's just everything that boxing should be. You know what I mean? I think he has this weird attraction to me for that.
Do you think it's the Eastern European names? You know, you got Triple G, you got Lomachenko, who are both phenomenal fighters. They're just not crossing over, though. They're just not.
I think that is a big part of it. Yeah, I think it is a big part. People just, they look at that name, and a lot of people, they just look away. They don't bother. Lomachenko, this isn't fucking worth it. And they just move on to the next thing. It's unfortunate.
So we also have some HBO boxing.
Whoa, motherfucker! I need a prediction out of you. Lomo or Linares, and how is it going to go down?
I say Linares is going to put on one of the best boxing displays you've ever seen him do. He's going to look phenomenal. He's going to be focused, and he's going to get knocked out late in the fight. I got Vasyl Lomachenko winning this fight.
You have Vasyl Lomachenko winning this fight by knockout. I'm going to take Lomachenko. I don't think it's even going to be particularly close. I think Jorge Linares is going to come out and do some amazing things, but I think this fight, I would be surprised if it hit the 8th round.
Do you think that if Lomachenko wins, Mikey Garcia's already moving back to this weight class? Do you think that's the fight that would cross over?
I do. I think it's a little underrated how popular Mikey Garcia is. Mikey Garcia is one of the few guys that people have come up to me on more than one occasion to ask me about my opinion about them, and I think that means a lot. It's like rats. Like if you see one rat in your house, you have like 300 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's the same kind of situation. Every time somebody asks me about a fighter once, I think that fighter is representative of a lot of people's interests or knowledge about the sport. So yeah, I think it would cross over, to answer your question. To stop rambling while high on marijuana.
That's going to be a great fight, and that's a fight that I think is 50-50 that I don't think anybody really knows who could win that fight.
Another fight that is still pretty 50-50 according to the odds maker, Saddam Ali is taking on the young Mexican sensation on short notice, Jamie Munguia. Jesse, tell me a little bit about Jamie Munguia. Have you ever had a chance to watch this guy fight?
Jaime Munguia,
I apologize.
I didn't know much about him until this fight. Well, actually, I started hearing a little bit about him with the Triple G fight. When Canelo pulled out, he came in there and wanted to replace, but for whatever reason, they couldn't get it finalized. But people were saying how great he is. He's an undefeated knockout fighter. He's trained by the same trainer that Oscar De La Hoya had. They brought him into prominence. It's his first big star since then, which just lets you know you could be a great trainer, but you need great fighters. I've heard nothing but great hype. All the boxing writers rave about this guy. And some people, a lot of people in the know are picking a huge upset in this. Saddam Ali was originally supposed to fight Liam Smith, which he would have been the favorite for that fight comfortably. this is a way tougher fight. And I'm interested. I'm excited to hear about this kid. A lot of questions. Undefeated fighter. He's looked phenomenal. He's never fought at this level. It's the big question. How good is Jaime Munguia?
28 fights, 24 knockouts is very impressive. This is about 3-week, roughly, step up for Munguia. I don't think that's just enough time. Saddam Ali is a bad motherfucker. Ranked number 4 in the world, according to most polls. This is for his WBO junior middleweight title. He's coming off of a hot beating that he put on Miguel Cotto. I think a lot of things are trending Saddam Ali's way. And especially with that short notice, it makes me very comfortable to pick Saddam Ali to box his way to a unanimous decision.
I will have to pick Jaime Munguia, and the reason I choose that is because Saddam Ali is pretty small for the weight class. He didn't look small for the weight class because he was fighting Cotto, who Cotto is also small for the weight class, so it's deceiving. Jaime Munguia is actually for this weight class and can possibly move up the middleweight. He doesn't look too much smaller than a Triple G, so just size-wise, if I think, and I'm going to stereotype, Mexican fighter is going to fight a Mexican style. The one time that we did see Saddam Ali look mortal was when he fought Jesse Vargas and got knocked out. Now, Jesse Vargas is not a knockout puncher, but if he can knock you out at welterweight, what can Jaime Munguia do?
We're going to see this weekend. And speaking of Vargas, this weekend we're going to see Ray Vargas put his WBC junior featherweight title on the line against Havhanazian. I'm sorry, I am way off with this.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about this fight. I don't know.
Havanazian. I'm going with Havanazian, by the way.
It is Havanazian. Yeah, that sounds right. I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about these two fighters. I don't know anyone they've beaten. I've looked at the records. It's not a juicy weight class. It's not a weight class that we're all salivating about. So it's good to see these two guys fight. I've heard this is going to be an amazing opener. It's going to be a war. It's evenly matched, and I'm excited to see it. I'm going to have to, if I have to just kind of give a prediction, I'm going to go with Ray Vargas.
I will agree, because I also don't know shit about this. Moving on to the MMA of the weekend, a fight that I actually think is going to set a UFC record. Amanda Nunes is going to defend in the main event of UFC Brazil. She is going to defend her bantamweight women's championship against number 2 in the division, Racquel Pennington. I believe this is the first ever UFC title fight between two people in the LGBT spectrum, and I think that's pretty cool. Both out and proud lesbians. Actually, both lesbians who are dating fellow UFC fighters, they should have had their girlfriends fight in the co-main event. That's the way. It should have been Nina Ansarov versus Tisha Torres co-main, motherfucker.
I'd watch it. This is a great fight. This is a great fight. I will say this. I'm about to come out and say this. I'm about to come out like they came out. I think it's a shame the UFC is charging money for this as a pay-per-view. This is a phenomenal UFC fight night. This is how you grow your business. You put this for free because this is going to do shitty pay-per-view numbers, but it's a great card. And they've done a great job of marketing it to the Brazilian population because a lot of them are hyped about this card, but no one's hyped about any particular fight.
I agree. There's a lot of Brazilian interest in this fight. I think this fight is going to do huge numbers in Brazil. And Amanda Nunes... I'm sorry?
The card, not the fight. I think it's the card, not the fight.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff, but there's maybe not that one gem of a fight. But I do think this main event is a lot more competitive than a lot of people are giving it credit for. The odds have Amanda Nunes as a negative 1,000 favorite, which is absurd to me. Pennington at plus 650.
Pennington kind of really caught people's attention when she fought Holly Holm. Holly Holm came to the UFC with all this hype. She was one of the best female boxers of all time. And Racquel gave her a lot of work. It made the fight competitive, and it made Holly Holm look mortal. Since then, we got to see how good Racquel Pennington is. She beat Jessica Andrade, sent her down a weight class, beat Bethe Correia, who had competed with Ronda Rousey for the title, and beat Miesha Tate, the former champion, and retired her. So either she's the best gatekeeper in the division or she's the number one contender if I ever saw one.
In some of these women's weight classes, unfortunately, they have enough depth that it's really kind of the same thing. Good gatekeepers tend to rise pretty quickly in these divisions. I think Racquel Pennington is a bad motherfucker in this division. I think she has probably the best chin. I think she has some of the best grit. I think her clinch work is some of the best in this division. And, you know, Nunes, she tends to win with these big explosions, and she tends to rely on putting people out. I think that Nunes, who is coming off of a 5-round decision where she was able to win the 5th round, I think she has shown cardio problems in the past, and I would really worry about her coming into this fight and suffering from the same thing. I think Racquel Pennington has a very strong chance of coming on late.
But you also have an argument that Amanda Nunes is the greatest female fighter of all time. Let's look at the record. She beat the 45-pound champion, Jermaine Durand-Domain. She beat the NXT Women's Champion, Shayna Baszler. She beat the Olympic silver medalist, Sarah McMahon. She beat the multiple-time kickboxing champion, Valentina Shevchenko. And she beat the face of women's MMA, Ronda Rousey, and beat Miesha Tate for the UFC 135-pound championship.
She beat the face and ass of women's MMA, Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate. She has an incredible resume. I think when you're talking about resumes against anybody, she is number one. I think when you take into account popularity, appeal, and thrill, I still think that you have to rate Cyborg as probably the face of women's MMA. She still has that swagger about her. But Amanda Nunes is an amazing fighter, amazing champion, headline UFC 200, has headlined most of the cards she's ever been on. They do have common opponents in Miesha Tate and in Kat Zingano, who ironically has beaten both of them. Something else that I want you to keep in mind before I ask for your fight pick, Jesse. Racquel Pennington, coming off of a 546-day layoff. What is that? Why are people getting title shots after 546 days off? Does that speak to like lack of depth in the division? What is this?
So I think the big layoff is definitely going to affect Racquel Pennington, especially because, you know, she does have a great resume, but I argue if she's still 100% in the sport, she's kind of like the Pat Barry to Tisha Torres' Rose Namajunas. She's kind of become like the coach to the girl who could be the champion as opposed to trying to be the champion herself. I think that has a lot to do with her layoff. And when I look at their Instagram page, I'm seeing a lot more of Racquel Pennington trying to go on dates with her wife than trying to be the best fighter on the planet.
I think that's a great point. I am picking Amanda Nunes by decision in this fight. I don't think she's going to be able to get the knockout. Racquel Pennington really has impressed me so much with her chin, with her tenacity, I guess you would say. She just has balls. There's no other way to put it. This girl has big brass balls. Who do you think is going to win this fight?
I got Amanda Nunes by knockout, and the reason is because Racquel gets hit a lot, and I think Amanda Nunes is merciless with her power. So I actually got Amanda Nunes by knockout, and I too am impressed by Racquel Pennington. The fact that she turned Tisha Torres from straight to gay is fantastic. I think it's a phenomenal story. If you haven't ever seen it, look at the interview about how Tisha Torres came to terms that she was strongly attracted to Racquel Pennington, and she was like, I'm not gay, but I want to fuck that girl, and she did and married her. So big props. I'm impressed.
I believe to hear them tell it, Tisha realizes she's a lesbian. She is not turned into a lesbian. If I can defend that for one moment. The co-main event. These guys have never turned anybody gay, I bet. Number 2 in the world at middleweight, Jacare Souza, the Brazilian alligator.
Souza.
Motherfucker, who are you telling about Portuguese? Porra. Cala a boca. He is taking on number 5 in the world, noted fat boy but great fighter, Kelvin Gastelum, in a probable title eliminator for Robert Whittaker's middleweight crown. Both these guys have won, I believe, 4 of their last 5, although one of Gastelum's was a no contest because it was overturned for weed. The odds makers would have you believe that Jacare Souza is a slight favorite coming into this fight, but Kelvin Gastelum has a long history of taking out guys who are in their late 30s, early 40s. Do you think that Kelvin Gastelum might have an edge here on a slightly older Jacare?
I think he does. I think he absolutely does. And I think that Jacare's last 4 fights are a little bit deceiving. If you look at his last 4 fights, yeah, he beat Vitor, but that's like a wash. I mean, him and Calvin both beat Vitor. That guy, it's an easy win now. Kamosi, let's face it, who is Kamosi? He's not really a big name. Tim Bosch loses to anyone with a pulse. And Derek Brunson's the only one in there that I can kind of give him a win, but he already beat him once. So he already kind of had his number. Calvin Gastelum, I'm a little bit more impressed by him. He beat Tim Kennedy when he wasn't supposed to. He beat Johnny Hendricks in a way more impressive fashion than anyone expected him to. And the victory over Bisping, yes, Bisping was coming off a loss, but it still was the former champion.
He does nothing. Listen to those 4 wins. He does nothing but beat the fuck out of guys he's not supposed to, who are a little bit older in the division. Johnny Hendricks, Tim Kennedy, Vitor Belfort, Michael Bisping, all aging statesmen who all kind of needed a shakeup to say the newer generation is here. Kelvin Gastelum is just, he's, along with Robert Whittaker, one of the vanguards of this new generation, and I think it's his time at middleweight. I actually have him by TKO in this fight.
I do too.
I think his striking's a little bit more precise. I like his jab. I think Jacare relies on the one punches a little bit too much. And I don't think Jacare is going to be able to get Kelvin down. Kelvin's a motherfucker with his takedown defense. Jesse, this fight this weekend is historic. It truly is historic that we have coming up. Number 12, Lyoto Machida is taking on all-time legend Vitor Belfort in what is Vitor Belfort's last UFC fight. Machida, a legend in his own right, mind you, but this is Vitor's last time making the walk. Are you excited to see this?
I'm glad to finally see Vitor retire. He's from the 90s. He kind of bursted onto the scenes in like 96, 97.
I think it was like UFC 11. Jesus Christ, Vitor, how fucking old are you?
Every stage of MMA. I mean, this is a guy who's been in there with Chuck Liddell, and he's been in there with John Jones. I mean, the guy's seen every single stage of MMA. He's seen it from the tournament style all the way to UFC on Fox, all the way to the mainstream appeal, to the kind of decline we're experiencing now. Like, he's been through it all, and I'm glad to finally see him, be done, because his best days are clearly behind him. He doesn't even look like the same human being anymore. It's crazy. Lyoto Machida, one of my all-time favorite fighters, the Dragon. I will be rooting for him until he quits. I hope this is his retirement fight too. I'm tired of seeing him get knocked out by the best in the world. So I got to go with Machida for this fight. How do you feel about this fight?
I am. It's a sad moment to see Vitor Belfort taking the walk one last time. Although I do think it's obviously very warranted. He is the all-time UFC leader in knockouts. How can you not love the guy? We have followed him since he was the young Mike Tyson, knocking out everybody, knocking out Vanderlei, running him down against the cage. His comeback, he fought Chuck Liddell. He won the UFC light heavyweight championship for a hot second off of Randy Couture in one of the weirdest fights of all time, when his glove in the first 10 seconds cut Randy's eye, so they had to stop the fight. So he is technically a former UFC champion. Up through his Pride days, he comes back, he's steroided out of his fucking gourd. The knockout loss to Anderson Silva, the knockout wins over guys like Luke Rockhold, over Michael Bisping, and then sadly, he has that fight with Weidman, his one last big shot at glory, loses that, and it's just been a downward slide ever since. He's lost 4 of his last 6, Machida has lost 4 of his last 6. I'm gonna favor Lyoto Machida a little bit, but I'm excited to see Vitor Belfort taking his much-deserved rest.
I'm excited for it.
I'm out of breath. Sorry, that was a long time for me to talk.
It's a great fight night card. This is not a pay-per-view.
So you would tell people skip this?
Man, it's a tough one, man, because I'm going through this. All right, I can't justify telling someone they should pay $70 for those fights.
I agree. It's too much money. It's too much money.
I can justify telling people you should watch these fights on Fox. I can't justify telling someone go out of your way and watch this card.
We will, though, Jesse, have fights for free over on Bellator. Bellator is having another round of their heavyweight Grand Prix. quarterfinal action between two light heavyweights who are both bumping up for this tournament. Light heavyweight champion for Bellator, Ryan Bader, is taking on Muhammad Lawal. Bader on a 4-fight win streak. Lawal is 2-2 of his last 4. My biggest question coming into this, what happens if Muhammad Lawal wins? What happens to that light heavyweight title? Is this technically a title fight because Muhammad Lawal is also a light heavyweight? Does that make him an immediate number 1 contender? Does he have to go through some kind of Bellator tournament to officially be a number 1 contender? I think it's really interesting that they paired these two guys up in the first round. Don't you?
I think it's very interesting. I think this is actually stylistically made for Bader to win. He's looked phenomenal. Lawal never really crossed over from great prospect to A-level fighter. I know the expectation was for that, and I feel like Bader's kind of coming into his own now. So I think this is a great fight. This is Bader's fight to lose.
It is Bader's fight to lose. Lawal is always, I hate to say it, he's always been a little bit of a basket case to me, even going back to wrestling. Keep in mind, he didn't make the Olympic team off of a last-second takedown to a guy he should have beaten by 1,000 points. And he loses by a takedown with literally 1 second left on the clock. For the Olympics. I mean, come on. So I have to favor Bader. I think he is a little bit more complete with his striking. I think their wrestling will cancel each other out. But keep in mind, Muhammad Lawal just lost to Phil Davis, and then Phil Davis turned around and immediately lost to Ryan Bader. I know the math doesn't always add up, but to me it was stark enough between the three that I can get a pretty good eye test. So I like Ryan Bader to win this, move on to the heavyweight Grand Prix semifinals, where he will take on, I believe, Matt Mitrione.
Who's Matt Mitrione fighting? Or did he already qualify? He
already qualified. No, Matt Mitrione beating Roy Nelson gets him into the semifinals.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's going to take on the winner of this fight. And then on the other side, it's Fedor versus Chael.
Great fight. I'm really excited about Bader versus Mitrione. I think that's a really good fight.
It almost feels like one side of this is like serious fighters, and the other side of the bracket is like washed legends. You know what I mean? They're going to meet in the finals. And I'm very into that. It gives us a nice mix of relevant fights like this one, fun fights like Fedor versus Chael.
Yeah.
Speaking of two blasts from the past, happy 40th birthday to John Fitch, fighting this weekend against Paul Semtex Daly. At one time, this would have been an unbelievably big fight, Jesse.
I will have to disagree with you. John Fitch was the biggest heel in MMA at a point just because he produced such boring fights, but he was so unbeatable. He was so good in such a boring fashion, in boring promos and boring personality, but he was undeniably good that I think...
the Lance Storm of MMA. The Lance Storm of MMA.
Yeah, there was like a certain joy every time he would lose. If he ever lost, the fans would erupt like, yes, one day we will live and not have to deal with him ever again. On the other side, we have Paul Daly, who's an exciting fighter. The guy's a great trash talker. He's everything John Fitch could never be. And he's also one thing John Fitch is not, which is a B fighter. Like, he's a solid B fighter. He's a solid gatekeeper. He can't wrestle. John Fitch, phenomenal wrestler. John Fitch, decent striking. Simtek, amazing striking. So it's going to be a good clash of styles, and I think Daly still has a little bit in him, but his weakness is wrestling, and John Fitch can wrestle his ass off.
I actually like Paul Daly to pick up the knockout win. I think that the tread is still there on the tire. I know John Fitch has won 6 of his last 7, all of the wins over UFC veterans, but he just turned 40, and he's facing a knockout artist like Paul Semtex Daly. Maybe I have a soft spot in my heart for the guy. I feel like I pick him every time he comes up on one of our breakdowns, but I'm going to go with Paul Daly here. I can't wait for him to prove me wrong and get ground to a dry humping decision against John Fitch. Do you have anything else for the week, Jesse?
I'm all good for this week. How about yourself?
Put yourself over, my brother.
Follow me on social media, Jesse Rivas on Facebook and J Rivas Comedy on Twitter and Instagram.
Follow me on Instagram at Joseph M. Gilpin, Twitter at BadTweetist. You can find a show announcement. I will have a show Saturday, but I don't remember enough of the details, so just go check my Instagram at Joseph M. Gilpin. For both of us, we will be back next week with all of the most important fight news. For Jesse Rivas, I'm Joe Gilpin. We'll see all you guys soon back on the block.